Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I am joined here by none other than Jordan Davis, our director of training, who, as many of you can see, she's the one that we label as the prettier of the two Jordans. So, Jordan, thank you for being here today. It's always amazing to get to talk with you.
Yep. Thanks for having me. This time always flies by when you and I get to just chat.
I know. I even before we were starting, I had to go get a fresh sheet of paper because every time I talk to Jordan, I take a page and a half of notes, and I didn't have my page ready for today, and so I went and grabbed that so that we have that for this morning. And we've got a great topic here today because we're talking about not hitting pause on the positive, not hitting pause on the positive habits that you have as we enter in to the holiday season. Right, next week is Thanksgiving, and I don't know about you, but I have definitely fallen victim to when Thanksgiving hits. I just kind of scrap the rest of the year as it relates to any type of positive habit or eating well, sleeping well, exercising. And so we're going to use today as this really prompt reminder. It's an encouragement to people to head into the holiday season with a plan to keep your positive habits and momentum rolling. And so,
Sure.
Jordan, I'm curious, how are you planning for the holiday season? How are you going to keep the positive from getting paused?
When I think about the holidays, I think about time with family. And if you are like me and spending time with your family, the OG family, your siblings, your parents, can be a little bit triggering for who you intend to be and a little bit defaulting of who you grew up to be. There's that part. And then there's also just the food that is never ending and the access to what's terrible and the time constraints and schedules that don't necessarily exist. And so there's a couple of things that I think about as I lean into that and prepare myself for the holidays. One thing I want to note is that Thanksgiving is coming late this year. It's like 5 or 6 days later than last year. And that means Christmas is like 3 weeks and 2 days after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
It's super fast this year. So that time is going to be like even shorter and just like a lightning bolt. Freed, I think about what are my values? Who do I intend to show up as? We talk about that when we train on My Freed Life. We go through the core values exercise and really leaning into who I am and who I know myself to be. For example, authenticity is a big one for me, right? And so if I feel like I'm masking or I'm not expressing myself, or I'm leaning into what I believe others think of me or what others feel I should do, I tend to struggle with that core value of authenticity. And when I find myself struggling away from my core values, I can easily get out of alignment. So that's one is just taking a look at my core values, reminding myself of those, and then making sure that I honor those throughout whatever it is that I'm doing during the holidays or whoever I find myself with. The second would be making sure that I honor my habits. So my good habits. And maybe that is a run. Maybe that is every morning I spend 15 minutes journaling. Man, when the holidays hit or when vacation hits, we tend to get away from those good habits. But holidays can be emotional. They can be intense. And the reality is when I'm at work and I'm preparing for a big day or a big meeting, I don't forego my best habits in preparation of that meeting. I do the opposite. I ensure that I am hitting those habits so that I am mind, body, and soul ready for whatever may come that day. And yet, when it comes to vacation and family and a lack of schedules, I know that habits can tend to fall by the wayside. So deciding the habits that I'm going to stick to and that are going to be non-negotiable for me. And then
Yeah.
the last one I would say is self-care. Just making sure I step away and take time for the things that I need the most, that give me pause and allow me time to reflect, whether it's getting a massage or it could be those habits of exercising again. I really love to paint. And so taking time to do that just to give myself time to reset and get back mentally to where I want to be.
Yeah.
What
Those
do you
are what?
what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. And I think that there's so much of this, it reminds me of a quote that came from a previous interview that we had on Wellness Wednesday when we interviewed my doctor, Dr. Neela Sandel. And what you just said kind of made me remember this quote of you're only as healthy as you are aware. And in this context, I think it's having the awareness of what is it, number one, that I want to remember from this holiday season? How do I want to remember this holiday season? And we've all heard beginning with the end in mind. And I'm not saying that you have to plan every minute of every hour of every day. And yet, being really clear, like, for example, this will be my first holiday season without my mom, and it's going to be different. And this is the first year, if I'm being honest, I'm really not looking forward to the holidays. The first time ever. Like, I always look forward to Christmas, and our kids are still at that magical age. But if I'm being honest, um, I'm not really looking forward to it. And yet I'm aware of that. And I also am aware of, you know, uh, what doesn't work for me. And it's
Mm,
cool that Rochelle and I are at an age, like it's at least in our relationship, where, you kind of get to a point where you start to accept people for who they are. If you're going to have a long term relationship, as you know, and Matt knows, there's a certain level of acceptance that you have to make, right? And, I think one of the things that she's accepted about me is that it doesn't work for me to just sit around all day. You know, those people, Jordan, that are just like, man, can't you just like chill? No, I can't. And it doesn't matter how much meditation I do, how much journaling I do. I am industrious by nature and I want to be moving.
yeah.
And so I used to struggle with that so much in the holiday season of like, I've got to spend every minute with everybody that's there. And yet going out and taking a long walk by myself or anybody that wants to go with me is cool. But being just aware of where, number one, how I want this holiday season to feel, how I want to remember it. But then also just, I think the question of what doesn't work for me, and sitting around for days on end doing nothing does not work for me.
What
I
I
just
hear you what I hear you saying too in that previous part, Freed, is intent. You did me the honor of at one point I was really tangled in relationships and had a lot of anxiety about something that was upcoming. And you really helped me get clear on let's imagine that weekend's over and what is the intent? Like, what do you want to come out of that? What do you want to leave feeling?
yeah,
And I really loved like the way that you know, um, shared that and had me cast that out. It was a game changer for me. Like after the holidays, what is my intent? How do I want to feel? How do I want to look? Who do I want to have spent times with? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that's so powerful and easily missed,
yep,
to set our intentions and get clarity because otherwise life happens by default.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And one of the things that you said about like, and I want to make sure that this isn't lost on anybody when she's talking about when she has a big presentation or something big that's about to happen, she's dialed in and she's going to follow her routine, utilize her habits. And if you think about the holidays, for some of us this is like an athletic event, right? And so you want to be dialed in and you want to be really focusing on engaging your good habits, because this is a period of time where I think a lot of momentum is made or broken. And it's always interesting to me when I listen to people and they say, I had this Thanksgiving and then we went through, whatever you celebrate. It might be Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever, and then New Year's. And, they eat too much, they drink too much, they stress too much, they don't sleep enough. And then some kind of miraculous flu bug bites them and then they're sick for like the first week of the year. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you've been taxing this thing for 4-6 weeks. And I think that another point that has really helped me, through the holiday season is isolating things, right? Like Thanksgiving dinner is one dinner. It doesn't have to become a 4-day eating whatever you want festival.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we can really just, focus down and isolate these things and make it so much better. And we feel better. And I think we're far more likely to actually enjoy the holiday season from that perspective, right?
Yep. I would agree. I actually wrote down in one of my notes while you were talking, like moderation and moderation when it comes to everything. Like you said, drinking too much, eating too much. Sometimes it's too much exposure to certain people. Like that can be in moderation. Like my father-in-law always says fish and family start to stink after 2 days. He doesn't spend more than one night ever anywhere. And so for him, moderation is so key to the upkeep of his relationships. He would rather come more frequently and stay for less time, knowing that everything is better in moderation. Any kind of, any kind of part of our world, even if you look at like the degrees of happiness of kids when they get a 3-day weekend or a 4-day weekend, as opposed to holiday break when they're off for a month and they start to take all that for granted. Right. And so just that little bit of moderation can go a long way when you allow yourself to just have a Thanksgiving dinner.
Yep. That's right. And I think also that, if you can take some of the routines and habits that we use from business, you can apply it right into your personal life, especially around the holidays. I mean, none of us get to any measure of success unless you're going to have some type of system around managing yourself inside of time, right? And one thing I've noticed about myself, Jordan, is like my schedule is rigid. I mean, if you talk to my team, they're like, I don't know how he does this. And yet I'm just used to it. It's always been that way, at least for the last 10 years. And when I come out of like a super rigid schedule and then I plunge myself into no schedule, you would think I'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. That's not the case at all. It's like complete anxiety to me. And so I was talking to Rochelle about this a few days ago. I said, look, if we're going to spend like over Christmas, we were talking about how we're going to spend like a week at home. We're going to go see both sides of her family and mine. And I said to her, I was like, look, that's great. And yet let's plan some things so that we're not just sitting in this abyss of empty time. And again, just knowing that doesn't work for me. I don't love just trying to figure out what we're going to do that day, especially with all the holidays and all the emotion and stuff that happens. And so I think the big thing that I want people to take away, at least from my perspective, is if you're going to be a whole human, if you're going to live a life of freedom, regardless of what season we're in, even if it's holiday season, I think you just have to be dead clear on what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean you have to be completely inflexible, but make sure that you are setting up the environment so that you are taken into account. And I think moms probably struggle with that as well, because I've seen this in our household, and I'm sure it's the same in yours. But man, they really stress about the kids and everything being perfect and put a lot of pressure on themselves. Is that true?
I think I did for a long time in the first few years. And then I think I just kind of gave up on all the shoulds. As you say in My Freed Life, don't should on yourself. Like I had all the ways that it was supposed to look in my head, or it was supposed to appear on social media. I think I used to have all the things I should do as a mom. And actually, I think with our coaching and what you teach in My Freed Life is like, don't should on yourself. Like, don't have all the I should be this and I should do this and they should have matching pajamas. I think I got away from the perfect holiday picture and of them opening their presents and the perfect response from them. Like, here they are smiling, they love this gift. I got away from a lot of that and started giving myself grace. But one, I think that's a lot of the work that we've done. And two, just a lot of like failing. I had all the ways that we didn't measure up and all the times that I thought, why can't we just have this or why can't we just have that? But one, I had two boys, and I don't know if you know anything about boys, but they don't tend to cooperate like girls do. I'm sure yours read very nicely, crisscross applesauce sitting on the floor. Mine are hyenas, and also they don't respond. Like, even when I video, grandma had sent a gift and they open it, like they don't respond with, this is great, thank you. Right. I mean, it's insane. So, and then they don't care so much about tradition or matching or this or that. They want their own personality. And, I've just leaned into it's about everybody getting out of the day what they wanted. I think you hit the nail on the head with intention. What is your intention out of today? What is your intention out of this weekend, this holiday? Sometimes for my kids, that's just to relax. And for us to haul them all over the state of Texas, they didn't get their relaxing weekend. And then we're going to fling them back into school for another month. And, that just didn't do it for us. And I guess I gave myself permission a long time ago to get away from all the things I should do. But it's hard. It's
Yeah.
definitely hard.
Yeah. And, I think that, again, so much of the work that we do here is like, I'm just endlessly fascinated with how programs, right, habits, things get downloaded into us without us having any real awareness around that. Most of the time, we're too young to be able to cognitively understand that in the first place. And, when you think about what she just said, it's such a great way to kind of observe and examine your shoulds, right? Because shoulds are just stories in your head. And we teach this in my Freed Life through the Steels model, but you look at and Jordan was one of the people that I believe taught me this. And I think originated with Brene Brown. But this season, it triggers so much in us, and so much of those triggers show up in those stories of should. And the story I'm telling myself is the story I'm telling myself is that we've got to have this picture perfect for the kids, that we have to have this perfect dinner. And, one of the things that always drives me crazy is when you ever have those people that every time they're in your environment, it's like walking into a new room means that everybody has to stop and pose for a picture.
Yes.
And it's like, I can't stand that, because it's like you're ruining the vibe, you're ruining the momentum and the flow of this. I'm not saying that you should never stop and have a picture,
Sure.
but the real essence of this is, what is the energy that everybody is enjoying here? How do we keep that going instead of constantly having to pause and look happy in this picture? But if you can use that language pattern of the story I'm telling myself is, I think that could be a very freeing thought or very freeing process for a lot of people as we move through the holiday season, purely through what they're telling themselves that they should want or should do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a great communication tool that doesn't place the blame on anyone else. It
Hmm.
doesn't say, you're making me feel like XYZ. The story in my head is, you want me to show up like this. And then they have permission to either confirm that or say, that's not at all. I just had a bad day. Or I'm just stressed out because we're around my mother. So, by telling on our thoughts, with that powerful tool of the story in my head is, you don't blame anybody else, and you get permission to tell on your thoughts so that you can get clarity around what's really happening in this situation. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the story in my head is not at all reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. And, one thing that I've learned is that we do have to have the courage, one way or the other, to tell on our thoughts.
For sure.
And when you when you think about what happens, what's the process of actually telling on your thought? Number one, you've got to be able to express it in language. So you're going to have to be able to take this thought out of your imagination, and you're going to have to put words around it, because you're going to ship this right to another person. That's the act of telling. And so when you have to put language to something, it has to go through the logical part of your brain. And the other piece to this is that the act of expressing something like that, we have what are called mirror neurons. It's why I'm one of those people, like, I can't watch people get hurt. I can't watch people on skateboards or,
I can't either.
I can't take it. Right. And
I always thought it was the 3 knee surgeries that I just was too empathetic, like from experience. But they're like, watch this guy's leg go backwards. I'm like, no, that's
no,
horrible.
no, I hate it. And that's because we have mirror neurons. What's happening to them, we are putting them ourselves through their perspective and imagining and feeling as if it had happened to us. And so when you're shipping this idea to somebody, and remember, you had to do it through the language and logic and all these things, you're simultaneously receiving it. And I don't know how many times I've been on a coaching call and I don't even say anything. They're sitting there just expressing thoughts, and they have the space to say whatever it is that they want to say without fear of judgment. And they get to a point where it's like, this is kind of crazy. I can hear what I'm saying right now, and as I'm hearing it, I realize that this makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about, having or finding the courage to tell on your thoughts, this is why it's so important, because that imagination can work for you, but it can really work against you. And
I like to liken it to like thinking there's a monster under your bed, and when you turn out the lights, it seems silly, right? Or when we turn on the lights, so we're like turning the lights on our fears. But because my kids, especially Carson, my youngest, who's 10, he was the one who most frequently thought there was a monster under his bed, and he was terrified, and he'd call us up, say, I think there's a monster under my bed. And I'm like, buddy, you have a trundle. It's not even physically possible, right? And so often, like you said, when we tell on our thoughts as they come out, it's like, I just realized that this is really silly.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that I've said this, and it's sometimes hard for people to wrap their mind around it, but a thought that originates in fear, left unexpressed in a human imagination, can become toxic.
For sure.
And so finding the courage to tell on our thoughts. Plus, I think the other piece to this is, in the holiday season, what most of us really want is to connect. We want to connect with the people that we love. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to give and to receive. And, when you find the courage to genuinely express what's in your head and your heart, then you get the greatest gift, which is you foster genuine connections with people. But the opposite is also true, that if you don't find that courage and you're expressing yourself in disingenuous ways, then you create inauthentic relationships.
For sure.
And I think that gets magnified during the holiday season. People are lonely in a room full of people, and the reason why is because they're the wrong people, but you've never had the balls to say anything. You heard it here. I think that happens a lot.
The last thing that I would want to leave on is this concept of a little black box.
Yeah.
And we teach it in My Freed Life. And I love what you're saying about intent. What is my intent to get out of this? And so if we liken it to that, what is the intent of a little black box on an airplane? And that intent is to record no matter what happens. So it has intentionality. It has a goal. It has a game plan. It is going to record no matter what happens. It has a purpose, just like you're going to go in with your intention and your purpose. And, it doesn't matter if that plane is flying, if it's falling, if it's failing, if it's on fire, right? It is going to record regardless. It's indestructible, and it is going to record. So if we take a lesson from that and we say, one, what is my intention or my purpose? And two, how do I ensure that it's indestructible? So that no matter the situation, I am equipped to handle it. And, we talked about core values. We talked about building your habits. If you take care of you, I guarantee you're going to be in a far better place to take care of when things hit the fan, when something goes awry, when you've done that to take care of yourself. But going through and deciding what is my intention and what do I want to experience and leave this situation with, or what do I want to come out in January with? And no matter what, being committed to that, kind of like a no matter whatever it takes situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, the other kind of lesson behind the little black box, as you mentioned, is it's indestructible. And that if you're going to be a master of self, then you're going to eventually realize something. And that is that what happens out there has nothing to do with what happens in here. Now, at first glance, you may not agree with that, but the true masters of life, and I posted this, I don't know, a few weeks ago on Instagram. I think it was also in the Facebook group, but you're going to go far farther in life trigger proofing yourself than trying to trigger proof the world.
Yeah.
And that's what she's talking about, is the ability to trigger proof yourself means that there's a part of you that is indestructible as it relates to the circumstance of life. And I'm sure that there's exceptions to that rule, something tragic, traumatic, whatever. But as it relates to just going home for the holidays, I think it's really smart, as she mentioned, to take and, have an intention, but also take responsibility for the fact that there is a part of you that interprets the world and then creates a feeling in you. And if you can take control of that interpretation, you can separate what's happening out there, the world, from what's going on in here. And it's one of the highest forms of self-mastery.
Yep.
Yeah.
Think about like a firefighter running into a fire, right? Like it's such a great visual of what's happening out there is horrible, and yet like nobody with good sense would run into a fire, and yet there's an intention, there's a purpose, and they're unaffected by it. They have a purpose in what they're doing, and what's going on around them isn't going to affect what their goal is. And it takes a lot of like courage and bravery to figure that out and then to go pursue that in lieu of whatever is going on around you.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Mrs. Davis, thank you for being here today.
Having me.
Thanks for everything that you do for our community. I know we're all better for it. And I trust that everybody here today is going to take what we shared and don't hit pause on the positive. Stay in tune with your good habits. Keep moving forward through this time of year. And remember, you're going to look back on it, and you want to look back and be proud of how you showed up in this holiday season. We don't have Wellness Wednesday next week. We'll be taking a break for the holiday. And yet we trust that you all will have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. And we will be back the week after Thanksgiving with a brand new Wellness Wednesday. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Hey, guys.
Bye-bye.